We finished building the first half of the footer, and before we move on to the second half, I need to install some plumbing. Specifically, I need to install the septic drain and the gray water drain. So I did the septic drain first, and I used PVC pipe for that, 4-inch coming in and then splitting off to 3-inch sizes. And now I'm working on the gray water drain, which I'm using ABS pipe for. That's the black pipe you see here. And I came in with a 3-inch line, and then I split off to 2-inch lines going to each bathroom. The gray water drain doesn't need to go to the kitchen. I'm only collecting gray water from the bathrooms, and specifically from the bathroom sink and the bathroom shower. You can't collect gray water from your kitchen sink because it has the food particulates, and it's not good for use in the gray water system. So anyway, I'm installing the ABS pipe here, and I'm just going along, making sure that it has a consistent slope. The specific slope isn't critical. You need to be about a quarter bubble at least. And so I'm just making sure that I have a good minimum slope going down, and then I'm bedding everything really well and packing things down. So when I do the bedding, I try to make sure that there's no rocks, basically looking for sand or fine dirt to put in around the pipe so that you don't have rocks that could impact or scrape the pipe. And then I'm also packing it down as I go along. And the packing is really important, I think, because it keeps it from settling later. So I'll actually use the back of the shovel or my foot to pack and tamp the dirt down as I go along. And that keeps it from settling later on, which is real important because over time it could settle, and then it could change the slope of your pipe. So I do that as I go along. I did the same thing with the white pipe, which is my septic drain, which is directly in the same trench as this black pipe here. It's just underneath. So I put in the drain pipe for the septic first, and then on top of that, I'm putting in the gray water drain in the same trench. After everything was level and bedded and kind of compacted in, I went ahead and covered everything up with dirt and kind of packed it down. The main reason I did this right now is just to keep the sun exposure off of it. The sun will impact ABS and PVC and degrade the quality of the pipe, so I tried to cover everything up to keep it from being damaged by the sun, because it may be a good while before I get back to it. And then also we'll come back in later and spray paint the exposed ABS to give it another layer of protection from the sun. We did have a pretty robust monsoon season here, and we saw a lot of rain over the past 6 weeks or so. And so we kind of gave these trenches a test. And so even with all that rain, we saw very little settlement. And so there again, that's the value of compacting as you go and really tamping things in. We decided to build a temporary bathroom structure on the location just for convenience. So we'd have one out there and easy access. It was convenient because we already had the septic system completed, so we decided to plumb it right into our existing septic system. And we also have water on the location. It's stuffed up, and it'd be easy to tie in, so we decided to make a fully functional bathroom with a flushing toilet and sink, and actually put it located on the pad in the exact location that one of the toilets is planned to be. So I set about to finish running my septic line and a water line over to the exact location where they will be when the structure is complete. So I needed to do that anyway, get the pipe stubbed up in the correct location, before I pour the pad. So needed to run it over there and get it located perfectly in place anyway. So I went ahead and did that, and then just decided to go ahead and build a temporary bathroom in that exact spot and use that plumbing. So I stubbed up a 3-inch septic line to connect the toilet to, and also a vent line, which will be actually inside the wall. Got those both located in place, and then started to build the structure. The structure we designed isn't anything fancy. It's just a cheap, economical structure to use temporarily. So we basically built it on skids and made it to where it would be movable later on. And just built it, as efficiently, as cheaply as we can. It ended up costing $500 to $600, and that includes the toilet and the sink and the plumbing and pretty much everything for the structure. Once we get through using it for the house build, we'll probably repurpose the structure for something else, be a small shed or a chicken house or something along those lines, but I'm sure we'll find a use for it and it'll be movable. We made the little structure 4 foot wide by 5.5 feet long. Didn't put any windows on it, but did put vents on both sides and the top, and those actually let in sufficient light during the daytime that you don't need any kind of a light out there. I just made the door myself using the cutout piece of the board that I cut out to make the doorway, and so it's just a pretty basic structure. It's got a working sink, a working toilet. We put in some shelving there for storing supplies, and that's pretty much it. Now that I have all the mechanical stuff running into and out of the pad, I can start work on the forms again and finish it up. So I have electric and water coming in, and I have gray water and black water going out. And so that's all finished up, and I'm ready to now form up the second half of the footer pour. And so to do that, I just wanted to reuse as much of the material from the first pour as I could. So I was able to reuse the forms from the first pour to form up for my second pour. So it was a bit of work just taking those old forms and kind of rebuilding them a little bit. They were a little bit kind of warped, from the moisture of the first pour. So I had to do a little bit of rebuilding and then just go through the same process that I did the first time, where I, connected them together with cross boards. And then I had to add some 2x4s along the bottom in order to attach the skirting that I was going to use this time. So the first pour, I didn't use any kind of skirting or any kind of wood sidewall going down into the trench. I just, put the form on the top and then filled in the entire cavity, whatever was there, with concrete. And that was really difficult, actually. It was really hard to seal between the form and the ground. We made it work, but it was a real challenge. And so this time, I decided to go ahead and use a OSB board to make a skirting that actually goes down to the bottom of the trench and captures the sidewalls there. Part of the reason I did this is because it was such a pain last time not to. And also, lumber is so much cheaper now. The cost of OSB is down to $20 a board when it was up close to $50 the last time I made the form. So that made a big difference. Anyway, I went ahead and bought some OSB and used that to bored in the sides all the way down to the bottom of the trench. Once I had the forms rebuilt and ready to go, including that 2-inch board along the bottom that I would hook the plywood skirting to, I was ready to go and get started placing them. Before I did that, I did need to run the rebar in the bottom of the trench. So I ran 2 runs of rebar about 3 inches up from the bottom of the trench all along, and then I started actually placing the forms. And so it was very much like the first pour. I just put them in place and then started leveling them. Once I got them fairly level, then I went in with the OSB sheeting and attached the OSB sheeting to the underneath to kind of make that skirt that goes all the way down to the bottom. Another thing that I had to take into consideration is protecting the pipe that is going through the footer. So you don't actually want to pour a footer directly around a pipe that's entering or exiting the footer. So I had the gray water pipe, the black 3-inch pipe was leaving the footer, and I wanted to protect it. So I cut a piece of larger PVC pipe and slid it on to cover the black pipe, and then I sealed it with silicone on both ends. It actually extended beyond the footer, about a foot in each direction, and then I siliconed it in place so that there's a gap between the gray water pipe and the shield pipe that I slid over it to protect it. And then I'll pour the concrete around that, and the concrete won't actually touch the pipe that's leaving. And so you want to protect all of your utilities like that. Some of the utilities I put in are so deep that they actually go under the footer, and so those don't need to be protected. But the ones that actually go through the footer need some kind of a shield pipe to go over them so that the concrete doesn't actually touch the pipe itself. When I poured the first half of the footer, I used a water level to get my forms all level and true. For the second half, I didn't feel like I needed to use the water level because I already had the reference points of the first half of the pour. So I actually just used a string and a level, kind of reference the first part of the footer that I had poured, and I used that to get everything level and true for the second half of the pour. So I was able to just use a string and level to get everything leveled up and true when setting these forms. The forms I was using are in 12-foot sections, and so those worked to cover the bulk of it. I did have to do some kind of custom carpentry at the ends to kind of tie everything together, so a little bit of work there. Those crossboards kind of serve double purpose, so I used them to hang the wire that held the rebar in place, so they kind of held up the rebar. They also kind of kept the form at the correct width, even after, while you're pouring, so they, keeps the forms from expanding during the pour or moving during the pour. But I also drilled a hole in them and then mounted a piece of rebar, and it held that piece of rebar in place during the pour. Basically just a 3-foot piece of rebar with bends at both ends, and I was able to put it through the hole in that crossboard and then put a screw in to keep that in place, and basically it just held that piece of rebar half in the form and half out, and that piece of rebar will tie the wall to the footer when we pour the walls. Finished up by staking it all in place. Basically just ran a board off the side and screwed that into a stake that we had pounded in the ground. Did that every 8 feet or so along the perimeter. And that staked it in place. And it was held pretty securely actually by the sheet boards that go down to the bottom of the trench. So it all felt pretty sturdy, and we were ready for the next pour.